Good morning, guys. All right, back with some more of the Iliad. Yesterday, I just gave you guys one, and it was basically just that they'd called a little bit of a truce after not agreeing to the proposal to send all the stuff back, but not Helen. But they decided to have a truce so that they could gather all their dead and burn them and then come back together. So that was book 7, and book 8 is called The Trojans Have Success, and it's exactly what it sounds like. And then book 9, you have peace offerings to Achilles. Because the Greeks are starting to lose, everybody really would like to have Achilles back as the greatest warrior. Of course, he's not for that. Book 10 is called A Night Raid, and this is when the Hector leads the Trojan forces, and they come down to the Greek camps down by the water. Obviously, they have a big night raid. And then we have book 11, and it's one I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. It's called the Achaeans, which are the Greeks, face disaster. And so as you see, the Trojans are kind of getting the upper hand, okay? And they really, really could use Achilles' help, but he's really, really not helping. He's literally sitting back in front of his little curved ships, his little hut, and just kind of watching what's going on. And while that's going on, there's a little bit of back and forth. It says that the Greeks enjoy a series of successes in the battle, especially Agamemnon, but then he's wounded and he has to come out of the fighting for a while. The fighting continues. Paris wounds Diomedes. Odysseus kills many allies, but he's wounded and has to go. So you're losing Agamemnon and Odysseus. The Trojans press forward. And then, let's see here. Let's see. It looks like Paris actually shoots an arrow and hits a guy named Machaon. And Machaon is really an important dude. And this is just interesting in the form of history and culture. But Machaon, it says here, Nestor comes and says, "Let Machaon get in there beside you on your chariot. Drive those sure-footed horses to the ships, and quickly too. Machaon is a healer, and so worth much more than these other men, with skill to cut out arrows and use healing potions." And so Nestor heard him. He climbed into the chariot. Machaon got in, and the son of that excellent healer, Nestor, whipped the horses. So since he was the son of a healer, he knew how important this guy was. So that's why they get him off the battlefield quickly, because he's very important. He's more important. He knows how to heal. He knows how to get wounds, how to get arrows out, and how to put together healing potions. So that's kind of interesting. So what happens is Achilles sees Nestor with his, he's in the chariot, and he's got Machaon in the chariot with him, and he's not really sure. And it says here that swift-footed Achilles, looking on, noticed Nestor. So he stood beside the stern of his broad-beamed ship, watching the harsh work of battle, the pitiful retreat. And at once he spoke out to Patroclus, his companion, calling him beside the ship. From inside the hut, Patroclus heard him, and he came out looking like Ares. So that means he looks like war, right? He looks angry. And it says, this moment marked the start of his final rush to death. Patroclus was the first to speak. "Why did you summon me, Achilles? Is there something you need me to carry out?" And Achilles told him basically, "Look, I think, but I'm not sure, that I just saw Machaon taken off this battlefield, and I'm not sure, because they were really going fast. I need you to go to the hut of Nestor, and I need you to find out if it was for sure Machaon." Okay. And so Patroclus obeyed his dear companion. Now I need to take a second and tell you about Achilles and Patroclus. If you've ever seen the whole movie Troy, and I don't think I showed you this clip, but there's a clip when they come, when Odysseus comes to get Achilles to see if he'll come fight. And he is actually training Patroclus. And you can tell that they have a close relationship. In the movie Troy, they are depicted as cousins, okay? And Achilles is kind of like his mentor, maybe his guardian, like somebody who he's helped raise, okay? So he's kind of like a mini Achilles. He's not as old, he's not as great, he doesn't have those kind of powers that Achilles has, but he's been trained by Achilles. But he's young, he's inexperienced. And in the movie, when they get to Troy, Achilles will not let Patroclus fight. He tells him, "You stay on the ship. Do not. You're not ready. You're too young. You're inexperienced. No, don't do it." But Patroclus is like real pumped up and he's always ready to go. Well, in the Iliad, okay, he is sent by Achilles to go and investigate who it was, but also to talk to Nestor. And so it says then that Paris obeyed his dear, Patroclus, obeyed his dear companion. So they're really close. I just want you to know that they're probably related. They might even be half brothers. They're cousins. They're something, but they're very close. Achilles is pretty, mean to most everybody, but not to Patroclus. Okay, that's like his guy. Okay, they're very tight. So it says here that Patroclus went and ran through the huts and ships, went inside the hut, sat down on some chairs, and the two men were drinking and quenching their parched thirst. They started talking, enjoying each other's pleasant conversation. And then when Patroclus stood in the doorway like some god, old Nestor leapt up from his shining chair, took him in, and invited him to sit. But Patroclus declined, staying where he was. So Nestor asked him, why is Achilles now showing any pity for Achaea's sons, the men that are hurt with spears and arrows? He doesn't know anything about our troubles. He's sitting over, on his butt by his ships, and he names all these people that are hurt. And this man here hurt with an arrow from some bowstring that I've just brought in from battle, right? Achilles is brave, but he shows no pity. He feels nothing for the Greeks. His courage is not going to profit anybody but himself. And I think that he's going to bitterly regret this once our army is destroyed. So this is what Nestor is saying to Patroclus. And so let me see. Let me see. Here we go. They asked Patroclus to persuade Achilles to come back. So it says, even now, if you'd speak to fierce Achilles, you might persuade him. Who knows? Some god might help you shift his spirit with your words. At least let him send you to war in command of the men. It may be well that you will prove a saving light to the Danaans, and the Danaans are part of the Greeks. Let him also give you his fine armor to carry into battle, so the Trojans might confuse the two of you and then refrain from fighting. It might give us some breathing space. It says something rare in warfare. Your troops are fresh. They might drive the Trojans worn out with fighting to the city far from our ships and huts. So maybe if you can't get Achilles to fight, let him let you fight. And maybe if you put on his armor, the Trojans will be fooled into thinking that it's you or that it's Achilles. And then they'll run back with their tails in their legs. It might just give us a little bit of breathing space. I get this, right? And so that's what they send Patroclus back. They send him back with that message, okay? And that's book 11. So what we have here is book 12, lot of summary, okay? Book 12 is called The Fight at the Barricade. Book 13 is called The Trojans Attack the Ships. And Poseidon actually steps in and helps the Greeks to rally a little bit. Book 14 is called Wounded Leaders Rally, the troops. And the Greeks are questioning again if they need to leave because it's just not going well at all. It keeps going back and forth, but they're losing so many men and they just don't know what to do. Hector, though, in book 14 gets wounded. So that's kind of a big deal because he's their main man. Now, book 15 comes up, and this one is called The Battle at the Ships. So the Trojans have come all the way down to the shoreline to where the Greeks are. And Apollo has healed Hector. And so Hector has rejoined the fighting. Hector actually gets down to the Greek ships and he is getting ready to fire them, which means literally set them all on fire. If their ships get set on fire, they ain't going nowhere. They're like never going anywhere. So it's pretty important that this does not happen. So the Trojans right this minute in book 15 have a huge advantage. Okay. So we're going to get to book 16, and boy, they don't really hide much of anything around here. Book 16, the name of it is called Patroclus Fights and Dies. So I guess you can tell what's going to happen. Patroclus is going to fight and die. So Patroclus goes to Achilles, okay, and he is crying, and he is, Achilles is like, what is your problem? But he did feel pity, and it said that he spoke to him, and his words had wings. So again, they're flying out. Why are you crying like some girl, Patroclus? You're crying like a girl. Is there something you need to say to my men or to me? I mean, some news that you heard? And Patroclus is like, no, you are by far the strongest of the Achaeans. Don't be angry with me. And he says, all of our men are hurt. So many people are wounded, but it's impossible to deal with you, Achilles. I hope anger like this rage that you are nursing never, ever seizes me. It's disastrous. How are you going to be of any use to later generations if you can't keep shameful ruin from these Greeks here? You are pitiless. So he really gives him a lot of hell about this grievance that he has. He's nursing this resentment. He's mad, and he won't forgive anybody, and he's just real hard-headed, right? And so he says, Patroclus continues and says, if your mind shuns some prophecy, if your noble mother has told you news from Zeus, then at least send me, and quickly, with the others in our troop of Myrmidons. I could be a saving light for the Danaans, all Greeks. Give me your armor to buckle around my shoulders, so Trojans mistaking me for you may stop the fight. Patroclus says, oh, how wrong he was. He was praying for his own death, his dreadful fate. Achilles, with some heat, replied, my dear divinely born Patroclus, what are you saying? I'm not concerned with any prophecy that I know about, nor has my mother said a thing from Zeus. And so, blah, blah, blah. He goes on a whole bunch of things, and he talks about Lord Agamemnon he brings up the story again about how Agamemnon has taken his girl out of my hands as if I were some stranger without honor, right? But let that be. It's over. Done with. Besides, my spirit did not mean to stay in rage forever. And so he says, come, put my famous armor on your shoulders and lead the Myrmidons out to battle. And the Myrmidons are basically Achilles' soldiers, and they've been sitting around on their asses too, so they're like cool, they're fresh. And it says, since black clouds of Trojans now surround the ships expecting victory. While a city full of Trojans comes at them without fear because they don't see me near with my helmet and its glittering front. Soon enough, they'll be running back, filling the gullies with their dead. But now they fight all through our camp because there's no spear raging in the fist of Diomedes. He's wounded too. I've not heard the voice of Agamemnon crying out because he's wounded. As for Hector, that man-killer's voice echoes everywhere, shouting at Trojans who fill all the plain, right? Even so, Patroclus, you must stave off disaster from the fleet. Go after them in force, okay? They may fire those ships and rob us of the journey home that we crave. Now, pay attention to what I tell you, because this is important, guys, what he says. It's super important. Because you're going to win me great honor and rewards so that the Danaans will send back to me the lovely girl that he misses, right? And the fine gifts as well. Once you push the Trojans away from the ships, come back. Do not press ahead. It says here, if Zeus, who loves his thunder, gives you the glory, don't keep battling those Trojans with me absent. You would decrease my honors. Okay, so Achilles, again, I'm not a big fan because he is all about himself and nobody else. But anyway, he says, do not let the joy of fighting and killing Trojans lead you on to the walls of Troy, just in case some Olympian god attacks you, right? Apollo loves his Trojans, so make sure you come back here to get me once your saving light has reached our ships. And, we too, we've got to do this, but you make sure. And so it says here that, let me see here. At that moment, Achilles, slapping his thighs, said to Patroclus, come on, up now, divinely born Patroclus, master horseman. In the ships, I see destructive flames going up. Trojans must not seize our ships and leave us no way to escape. Put the armor on and quickly. I'll collect the soldiers. So Patroclus dresses in gleaming bronze. First, he puts on his shin armor with silver ankle clasps. Around his chest, he put on the body armor of Achilles, finely worked and glittering like a star. On his shoulders, he slung the bronze silver-studded sword and the long the large, strong shield. On his powerful head, he set that famous helmet with the horsehair crest, okay? The plume on top nodded, full of menace, okay? Let's see here. Patroclus took 2 strong spears well fitted to his grip. He did not take Achilles' spear because no man could wield that except Achilles. So that's the one thing that he's not able to really take into battle because it's only Achilles. Nobody else can use it. It's too awesome. It's too big and powerful. And it's been made for him. It's actually made from the ash wood from the peak of Pelion. So it says, meanwhile, Achilles goes back into the huts of the Myrmidons. He gets everybody fired up, and he says they rushed out like flesh-eating wolves, hearts full of unspeakable fury, beasts, which in the mountains have caught and ripped apart some huge antlered stag. So in a pack, they charge off, right? That's how the leaders and commanders of the Myrmidons rushed out around brave Patroclus, comrade of swift Achilles, who stood among them there, urging on the horses and the warriors carrying their shields. So the armed warriors who went with brave Patroclus marched out in formation until with daring hearts, they charged the Trojans. Now, what you really have to know, there's a couple of huge things you need to understand. In the Iliad, Achilles puts the armor on Patroclus. He tells him to do it. He gives him a couple of rules, one of which is do not, once you get them out of our ships, once you take them away from where we are, then you get your butt back here and you get me. Do not go all the way to the wall. Do not. Well, you know exactly what's going to happen, don't you? But anyway, you have to understand that Achilles sends him. He sends him. And you need to understand that the Myrmidons, the troops, know full well that it's Patroclus. They know. They know. Achilles goes in and tells them what the plan is. They know that they're following Patroclus and not Achilles. Okay? So, here we go. They get out. Patroclus was the first to throw a bright spear right at the central mast where all the troops were clustered in the stern part of the ship. He hit a man, blah, blah, blah. Lots and lots of this, okay? Lot drove the bronze straight through, breaking the bone. The guy falls face down in the dirt, blah, da, 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 da. Man's muscles the thickest. Spearing the spear point sliced his tendons and darkness closed his eyes, right? So you get a lot of that. Let me see. Lots more of this. We get lots more spear point sheared off muscle at the bottom of his arm and broke his bone in 2. Maris fell with a crash and darkness veiled his eyes, right? These 2 slaughtered by 2 brothers went off. The sword grew warm with blood. Dark death closed up his eyes and strong fate embraced him. So they are kicking butt for sure. And Hector realized that the tide of victory in this fight was changing. He knew that things were not, something had changed and it was not working in their favor. And it said, but he stood there trying to save his loyal companions. That's how the Trojans, they finally fled. They started running in complete disorder, it says. Hector's swift-footed horses carried him and his weapons back, leaving behind against their will the Trojans held up at the trench. In the ditch, many swift horses lost their master's chariots when the poles snapped at the end. So Patroclus pursues the fleeing Trojans. Instead of going back like he's supposed to, he pursues the fleeing Trojans. So he pushed them back, keeping them from the city where they were trying to reach. So coming up, let me see, Patroclus strikes this guy named Thestor with his spear at the jawbone, smashing through his teeth, and he pulls the spear back, dragging him out across the chariot rail. This is kind of cool. It's gross, but it's cool. And it says that, so he's pulling him like a hook. And it says that just as a man sitting on a rocky point hauls up a monstrous fish out of the sea, using a line and a bronze bright hook, that's how Patroclus dragged Thestor from his chariot. Mouth skewered on the shining spear, he threw him down face first. And as Thestor fell, his spirit abandoned him. So Patroclus is just killing everybody. Death flowed all around Patroclus, and he slaughtered all kinds. They list all these people, all these Patroclus laid out one by one on the earth, which nourishes all men. So at this point, they would have captured Troy at Patroclus's hands as he raged, except for Apollo. Apollo's not going to have it, okay? He is going to step in. And this is cool. Sorry, but I love it. So Apollo, it says here that Phoebus Apollo, who stood there on the well-built wall, so he's standing on the Trojan wall, and he's intending to destroy Patroclus and assist the Trojans. 3 times Patroclus tries to climb up a corner of the high wall, okay? 3 times Apollo's up there going like this, shoving him down, his immortal hands repelling the bright shield. But when Patroclus for the 4th time came on like some god, Apollo shouted these winged words at him. Go back, divinely born Patroclus. This city of proud Trojans, according to its fate, will not be ravaged by your spear, nor even by Achilles, a far better man than you. So Apollo screams this at Patroclus on the 4th try up the wall. Patroclus draws back a little bit because he's pretty scared of this pissed off Apollo, right? And so it says, then Patroclus launches a charge against the Trojans, intent on slaughter. 3 times he assaulted them, like the god of war Ares, with terrific shouts. 3 times he killed 9 men. But when he attacked a 4th time, then Patroclus, that's when you saw your life end. Because Apollo, a terrible god, in that grim fight came up against you. Patroclus could not see Apollo. He hid himself as he moved through the confusion, for he advanced towards him hidden in thick mist. Apollo stood behind him. And then, this is interesting, with the flat of his hand, he struck Patroclus on his back, okay, on his broad shoulders, and he made his eyes lose focus. So all of a sudden, Patroclus can't really see what's in front of him. Next, he knocked the helmet from his head, and the horsehair crest rolled with the clatter under horses' feet. The dust and blood then stained the helmet's plumes. Up to that time, gods had not let that helmet with the horsehair plume ever get smudged with dirt because it was always guarding godlike Achilles' head. His noble forehead, too. It says later, Zeus awarded to Hector to carry on his head as his death loomed. So in Patroclus's hands, his heavy, long, shadowed spear, thick and strong, was completely smashed. Apollo smashed his spear. The shield and strap fell from his shoulders down to the ground. And then next, Apollo loosened the body armor on Patroclus. And his mind went blank. His limbs grew limp and he stood there in a daze. And so from close behind, a man named Euphorbus, who was a Dardan warrior, hit him in the back with a sharp spear between his shoulder blades. And he'd already knocked, this guy was pretty badass anyway, he'd already knocked 20 men out of their chariots, but pulling the spear out of Patroclus's flesh, he ran back again to blend in with the throng. He didn't stand his ground, even though Patroclus had no weapons for any fight. Okay, so his weapons had all been pretty much dropped or stripped from him by Apollo. So Patroclus, overwhelmed by the god's blow and spear, withdrew back to the group of his companions, avoiding death. But when Hector noticed brave Patroclus going back, wounded by the sharp bronze, he moved up through the ranks, so he stood close to Patroclus and struck him with his spear, low in the stomach, driving the bronze straight through. Patroclus fell with a crash, and the army was filled with anguish. Just as a lion overcomes a tireless wild boar in combat, that's how Hector, moving close in with his spear, destroyed the life of Patroclus, who'd killed so many men. His spirit fluttered from his limbs and went to Hades, lamenting its own fate, the loss of youthful manhood. So, very important for you guys to know the details in the Iliad, okay? We know Achilles sent Patroclus. He put the armor on. He told him to put it on. He went and told the men. The men all knew that it was Patroclus they were going to go fight with in disguise as Achilles. They go out. They send Hector back, but Patroclus disobeys Achilles. He does not come back. He's supposed to come back. Nope. He goes all the way to the wall, which he's been told absolutely not to do. He should have listened, because he was not only up against the Trojan forces, but he was mostly importantly up against Apollo. And Apollo kicked his ass. Apollo took his helmet off. He loosened his armor. He smashed his spear. He made him go blind. He made him be like kind of dumb, like stand there in a daze, so that this guy comes up and wounds him. He goes back into his ranks, but Hector sees that he's wounded, so he comes out and finishes him off. Okay? Now, remember, he does not have a helmet on at this point. The helmet, which has never been dirty before, is on the ground, and Hector just killed him. Please remember these things, because I'm going to send you the clip of Patroclus' death from the movie Troy. I'm going to find it right now. And I need you to see how Troy does this, the movie Troy. Because remember, there are no gods who intervene in the movie. So obviously they're going to have to do something super duper different. So be prepared. I'm going to find that and I'm going to upload that with this reading. Okay. There'll be a small assignment probably on Monday with this before we continue on and finish up the Iliad. But I'll see you guys and have a good weekend.